And in the name of our Savior Jesus Christ, who is the light of the world, who is the light that no darkness can overcome. Dear Christian friends. There's a story of a young lady who was applying for college. The story goes like this. She was going through the application and filling it out faithfully, but she got to a question that asked her if she was a leader or a follower. Reading that question, her heart sank. She couldn't conscientiously and honestly answer that question and say, I'm a leader, which she was assuming that's what the college wanted to hear. And so humbly she marked down follower. And she thought, that's it. They're not going to want me. They're not going to take me. I'm not going to college there. It was a month or so later when she got back the letter in the mail, a letter which would tell her whether she was accepted or denied in her application. She began reading the letter, and her heart rejoiced when she read these words. Dear applicant, a study of the application forms reveals that this year our college will have 1,452 new leaders. We are accepting you because we feel it is imperative that they have at least one follower. Are you a leader or a follower? Maybe you're not even sure what you are. But in the end, the world needs both, yes? If we're going to have leaders in this world, we need people to follow them. God made us all different. Some are leaders, some are followers. There's nothing imperatively right or wrong with being either one. The world needs both. But when it comes to our faith, when it comes to who we are that God has called, who God has called us to be, the fact of the matter is that God has called all of us, each and every one of us, all of His people, to be followers. God came to you in word. God came to you in the sacrament of holy baptism. He said, come and follow me. He invited you to come and see His love, to come and see the works that He has done on your behalf. And He said, follow me. And in that call that came through word and that call that came through sacrament, you said, I will follow. I will follow. God invited you, come and see me. Come and see my love. Come and see my gracious love that I poured out for you. Come and see me and come and believe in me. And by the grace of God, your answer to that call was, I will follow. In our gospel lesson for today, we see that at work. We see the gracious call of God, and we see what that gracious call of God can move God's people to do. We hear this morning that God came in graciousness and love to the disciples Andrew, Peter, and to Philip. And God said to them, I love you. Here I am. Here's who I am and what I have done for you. Now come and follow me. We heard a gracious call from God, and that gracious call from God always and every single time calls for a response from us. It's a gracious call that calls for a response. We see it again too in our Old Testament lesson for today. We see a time in which God had not been speaking to His people through a prophet. It had been a long time since He came to them in the Word and said, here I am, and here is who I am and what I've done for you. Now go and follow me. Listen to my word, listen to my commands, walk in my paths. It had been a while since God had done that, and there's a reason for it. God's people largely turned away from Him and from His Word. At this time in Israel's history, they had largely turned their backs on God and wanted to walk their own paths, wanted to do their own thing. They had turned to the worship of false gods. They had turned to the worship of their own gods, gods of their own creation. Or they had turned to the worship of no God at all. They were trying God's patience. They were trying God's patience in such a way that He had taken His word away from His people. He wasn't coming to them on a regular basis through one of his prophets, but now God, because he still loved his people, because he still wanted to pour out his grace upon his people, comes to them once more. He's going to do that through a young man by the name of Samuel. As we meet Samuel this morning, he's probably only 13, 14, 15 years old. He's a young man. Now, he's much more mature probably than a 13, 14-year-old boy would be at this age. He had been called by God to a life of responsibility. You remember the story of his mother. She was not able to have children, and she said, God, when I have a child, what I'm going to do, God, is dedicate the life of my son to you and to your service. And she did just that. So Samuel lived in the temple. Samuel lived in the temple, and he was serving the high priest by the name of Eli. And at this point in Eli's life, he's an aged man. He's not able to do all the things that he's supposed to do with his responsibilities of being the high priest, and so Samuel helps him with those things. And so maybe the things that Samuel does is he makes sure that all the lamps that need to be lit are lit. Curtains that need to be opened are opened. And Eli, in his older age, if he needs this help just getting around, doing the daily tasks that life calls for, he will help him with those things. So Samuel's serving in the temple. And one night as Samuel is sleeping, he hears the word, Samuel, Samuel. And of course, he'd assume that it's Eli who's calling him, right? It wouldn't be unusual for Eli to call him in the middle of the night and say, I need help with something. So he runs to Eli and says, here I am. Eli says, I didn't call. It happens a second time, and Eli says, I didn't call. Happens a third time, and now Eli figures it out. It's God who's calling Samuel. It's God who says, Samuel, I have work for you to do. I have a mission for you to accomplish. Eli knows this now, and so he says to Samuel, if you hear that call a third time, your answer is to be this. Speak. Your servant is listening. If we understand the spiritual condition of Israel at the time, that we can only see this call from God raising up a new prophet as a gracious call of God. Because what could have God done by right? As he saw this insolent and rebellion people always turning their backs on him and walking their own way and doing their own thing, he could have just gone ahead and turned his back on them, right? And said, I'm done with you. He could have said, you rebellious people, you keep walking your own ways and doing your own things. You keep on worshiping these false gods or creating your own gods or worshiping no God at all. He could have said, I'm done with you. I'll choose a different nation. I'll go a different path. But he didn't. God came to them in love. And in his graciousness and love, he raised up a prophet by the name of Samuel to bring once again his word to his people that they might turn from their sin and turn again to him. Let's take a moment this morning now and let's compare the spiritual condition of Israel at this time when God calls Samuel to the spiritual condition of today in our culture, our society. We often shake our heads, don't we, and just think, oh, this world is just going to pot. Everything's falling apart. This place is awful. This place is terrible. But I believe the old adage is true. The more things change, the more they stay the same. Yes? And I believe what Solomon wrote in Ecclesiastes when he said, there's nothing new under the sun. What was true of Samuel's day and age is true of our world that you and I live in today. In Samuel's day, people were living in spiritual apathy and spiritual rebellion. And if we took just a cursory look at our country and our society today, I think we can say the very same thing, right? There was a time in our country's history we would have claimed we were a Christian nation, right? We would have claimed that. And the statistics would have backed it up too. That most people in our country would have claimed Christianity as their faith. And the statistics show today that more than not would say the same thing today. I am a Christian. I believe in God. But there's signs around us which show us that things are maybe taking a turn in which way would not be pleasing to God. You don't have to walk far today, do you? Do you see a once thriving Christian church now with its doors closed? And there will be churches that say, we are growing by leaps and bounds. But the statistics would bear out that their growth doesn't come from the unchurched becoming churched, but from people just changing the churches that they go and worship at. And so by vast numbers, Christianity is shrinking in our nation right now. In our own church body. 30 years ago, we would have claimed 70,000 more people in membership than we claim right now. That's a big number, isn't it? It's a big number. And so Christianity in our church is shrinking. The more things change, the more they stay the same. Spiritual apathy has set in. What God sees when He looks at the people of our culture, of our society, is an insolent and rebellious people. What God sees when He looks at our culture, our society, is people who have gone their own way and turned their backs on Him, or never faced Him once to begin with. What we see people is worshiping of false gods, the god of self, or the god of their own creation. What we see is people taking God and saying, God, I love you, but God, I want you to be the God that I want you to be, and so I'm going to shape you and form you and fit you until you are the God that I like, a God that I can praise, a God that I feel I can worship. And in the end, that person has worshipped nothing more than self. So what is our loving and gracious God to do with a people such as this? What is our God to do when He looks at you and me? And He sees a people who come and worship and praise God, but at times whose faith is lukewarm at best. What is God to do with us? What is God to do with the people who claim Christianity on Sunday, but who live a life throughout the rest of the week which says something different? What's a God to do with a people like this? Here's what God does. He doesn't give up on us. And He doesn't turn His back on us. God continues to raise up people to serve Him and to follow Him and to bring His people His word. In our own church body, we'll see in a few months in May young men who will graduate from our seminary who proclaim that they are going to dedicate their lives in full-time service to the Lord to go and take His word to God's people. Not because they've earned or deserved it, but because God called them to come and to serve Him in that way. We may look at that as a ho-hum thing. Yes, it happens every year. Who cares? But I'm calling you this morning to marvel at the grace of God. To marvel at the grace of God who continues to raise up people to bring His word to His people, who comes with His gracious call and says to people, come and follow me. Serve me. And He comes to you with that same gracious call, does He not? God doesn't just call people to serve Him full-time. God calls you to serve Him full-time in your own way as well. Yes? God came to you in word and sacrament and said, here I am, I love you. Come and follow me. Come and see the works that I have done on your behalf. Come and see my love. Come and see my grace poured and showered down upon you. Come and see the works and the wonders that I have done on your behalf. God says, come and follow me. And He called you at baptism. And He calls you again in His word. And He feeds you in the Lord's Supper and says, here I am and here is my love. God graciously calls again and again and again and again. I marvel at the patience and the love of our God, who does not abandon his people, who does not turn his backs on those who all too often have turned their backs on him, but calls again and again, I love you. Come and see the works that I have done, and follow me. When God came to Samuel that night, there was really only one answer that Samuel could offer to God, only one right and true answer that he could set before his God, and that's exactly what Samuel said to his Lord. He said this, "Speak, Lord, for your servant is listening." Do you remember a few weeks ago when we talked about, in the Advent season, we talked about Mary, when God called her to a special task and a special job? We talked about how her answer to God just dripped in humility, right? She said to God, "May your word, Lord, be fulfilled to me. Lord, I will do what you ask. Lord, I will be your servant. I will follow your ways. I will do what you have called upon me to do." And I think Samuel's answer this morning is almost exactly the same thing as Mary's was. "Speak, Lord, your servant is listening. I am your servant, and I am listening to you. Your call, Lord, I will follow. What you will, I will do. What you command, that path I will walk in." Dripping in humility, but also dripping in obedience to the God who called. God called you. God has said to you, "Come and follow me. Be my disciple. Walk in my way. Follow my commands." Like Samuel and like Mary before us, there can be only one answer to this call from God that he has set before us. "Speak, Lord, your servant is listening." Speak, Lord, to me. Tell me your word. Bring me truth. Bring me your goodness and love, Lord. And there's only one proper response, Lord, on my behalf, on my part, Lord, and that is to follow you. Speak, Lord, for your servant is listening. Now remember that part that I just said there, Lord, your servant is listening. We are listening. That's the most important part of discipleship, isn't it? If we're going to walk, we got to know what way to walk. If we're going to follow, we got to know where to follow. And so we need to listen. And so as I said to you last week, the important part of this isn't, "Lord, sit down, Lord, for we are talking," right? We're not saying that to God, right? Not "Sit down, Lord, I'm talking," or "God, listen to me and what I have to say, God, and be the God that I want you to be and do the things that I want you to do," but instead, with humility, like Mary before us, like Samuel before us, "Speak, Lord, your servant is listening. What is your word? I will follow. What is your command, Lord? For I will walk in it. What is your will, Lord? For that is what I seek to do." It's a call to humility. It's more than a call to discipleship. It is a call to humility. To acknowledge that we are not in charge. That we are not the rulers of the universe. That God knows best. And we know that his will is one of love for his people. And so we say, "God, we are listening." So God's call seeks a response. The only response then is to listen to God and to his word. So that's the challenge that sets before us this new year, isn't it? Is to be in that word. Not just at church on Sundays, but to make that word an everyday part of our lives. Because if we want to know where to go and what to do and how to follow, then we need to listen. And the only way God speaks to us now is in his word. There, God in love shares with us that word of forgiveness for all the times we said, "Sit down, Lord, for we are talking." He says, "I forgive you." Jesus died for that sin too. Jesus poured out his blood upon that sin and has wiped it away. And in response to that good news and that new call from God, Lord, speak, your servant is listening. We will follow, we will listen today and every day, Lord, and we will walk in your commands. Speak, Lord, your servant is listening. A gracious call from God that calls for an answer from us. We are listening to his word today and every day. Amen.